Hello and welcome back to Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura and I am super excited for today's video. I am just going to go through all of the books that I read this year, and I will be talking about them very briefly, so I'm not going to be like giving reviews for every book. I'm going to try to use as few words as possible, especially the ones that I read for my book first movie episodes, because if you want to hear me talk more in depth about these books, then you can go listen to those episodes and hear more about the book and the movie. I do have spoilers in those videos though, so just be aware of that. Although I give a spoiler warning before every book and movie episode. Anyway, so you can click this link up here and that goes to my playlist for my book first movie video. So if there is a book here that you want to hear more about, you can find it in that playlist. I will also link to the playlist down below. I will also link to my podcast links and my blog and all of that. Also, if one of these books, I'm not going to say each book like, oh, and I did this for book first movie. To avoid having to say that each time, I'm going to have this logo right here. So when you see that logo next to the image of the book, you'll know that it is available as the book first movie comparison if you want to hear an analysis of it and how it compares to the movie and all that stuff. And while we're on the topic of my podcast and my book first movie, Spotify now has the option where you can rate podcasts. So I would appreciate it so much if you could rate my podcast, especially if you're giving it a 5-star rating. It would mean so much to me. And of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do book related content. I collect books like special edition vintage books. So I share my book collection as well as doing just book videos. And then obviously I have movie videos here and there in my book versus movie comparisons. So yeah, if you could like this video and comment your thoughts, as you're watching this and all that good stuff, it would mean so much to me. And I love commenting back and having conversations with people that are watching these videos and listening to the podcast. And I do have a video for the best books I read in 2021. So if you want to see that one, I will link to it down below, but you can also click on it right up there. Anyway, to get started, I am going to begin with just some basic stats for the books I read this year, starting with the number. So I read 55 books this year, which I'm happy with. That's like averaging a book a week, basically a little more than one book a week, and I'm totally happy with that number. I read 8 books that were under 200 pages long, 4 books that were over 500 pages long. I also read 5 books that were published before 1900. That's kind of fun. I enjoy reading older books. They just had such a eloquent way of writing back then, and it sounds so sophisticated. But anyway, I read 3 books that were published this year in 2021. I read 13 nonfiction books, and 9 of those were memoirs. So I do love memoirs. So yeah, so that's just some stats overview. And then as far as the longest book I read, the lowest rated book I read, whatever, as I talk about that book, I'll say like, oh, and this was the longest one or the shortest one or whatever. You get the point. Okay, and let's get right to the list of books. Also, this list is sort of in order of how I read them. It's like loosely in that order, not entirely. I didn't start utilizing Goodreads until like this month. So yeah, when I do this video in 2022, it will be a bit more organized because I'm going to start using Goodreads to keep track of these books and when I read them. Anyway, the first 3 books I read this year were the first 3 Harry Potter books. So I have read these before, but I was in a reading slump at the beginning of the year. And so I wanted something to listen to though when I was running. And so I was like, I'll read Harry Potter. And so I listened to the first 3 Harry Potter books. And then by that time, my reading slump was over and I was ready to move on to something else. But yeah, so those were the first 3 of the year. And then early this year, I read 4 Winds by KRISTIN Hannah. And if you want to know just my feelings of KRISTIN Hannah, you can click the link above where I talk about my complicated, conflicting emotions when it comes to her books. And this one, it was okay. But my video about KRISTIN Hannah basically explains my feelings about the 4 Winds, along with so many of her other books. And then another book I read was Apples Never Fall, and that one was also released this year, which 4 Winds was also released in 2021. Apples Never Fall was by Leanne Moriarty, and that was my first YouTube video I filmed like as a talking head, was a review for that book. And in the review, I'm a little harsh, like I gave it a 2.5, I think, and at this point, it's a solid 3. I don't see myself ever rereading it, but like it was fine to read it once. Also, the 4 Winds, by the way, was, aside from Harry Potter, those were the top 3 highest rated books I read. So Harry Potter aside, The Four Winds was the second highest rated book I read on Goodreads, and it does not deserve to be that high up. So that seems insane to me. Anyway, moving on. The Storyteller, which was released this year, written by Dave Grohl, and it's a memoir about, he's a musician. But in this one, I have a full book review video for it, and I enjoyed it. It was, 3.5, maybe 4 stars. But this one, aside from Harry Potter, this is the highest rated book that I read on Goodreads, which I liked it, but I certainly wouldn't say it was the best book. And based on Goodreads, this was the best book I read this year. So that was wild to me. I mean, as far as celebrity memoirs go, this one was by far better than most. But I don't know, that caught me off guard. If you want to know more about my thoughts on The Storyteller though, you can click this link above where I have my video book review for it. And then I read Girl Interrupted, which was okay. Catch Me If You Can, the movie was better. The Scarlet Pimpernel, yeah, it was good. It's definitely a chick flick, but yeah, it's good. The Drop, just stick with the movie on that one. The Drop is kind of just a waste. Like it didn't need to be here. Like he wrote it to be released along with the movie. Yeah, so the movie isn't even based on the book per se. The book was written with the movie. I mean, you can hear me talk about it in depth, but yeah. Anyway, The Drop, meh, stick with the movie. Woman in the Window, it was okay. AJ Finn, lots of drama with him, but the book itself, it was okay. It was fine. If Beale Street Could Talk, amazing book. It was in my video for best books of the year, and yeah, I really loved it. Mystic River, another Dennis Lehane book, and this one was good. Yeah, I liked it. Annihilation, Authority and Acceptance. This is the Southern Reach trilogy, and Annihilation I read for Book Burst Movie, and amazing trilogies. If you love sci-fi, like you have to read these books. They are so good. The Beach by Alex Garland, loved it. Never Let Me Go. This one was good. Yeah, it's makes you think. I enjoyed it. Q&A, which is the inspiration for Slumdog Millionaire, and again, like it was okay. It was fine. It was good. There was a twist in there that I hadn't been expecting, so that was cool. And then The Dark Fields, which was the inspiration for Limitless, and this one was good. I liked the movie. I liked the book ending more than I liked the movie ending. What's Eating Gilbert Grape? This one was a pleasant surprise. I liked this more than I thought I would. So yes, it was good. KLANSMAN. This one was unfortunately pretty underwhelming. It also just isn't the best written memoir out there. And yeah, underwhelming, I think is the best way to describe that one. The Prestige, amazing, loved it. Different enough from the book that you're still like trying to figure out what's going on, even if you've already seen the movie. So highly recommend. Another Night in Suck City, along with the reenactments. These two kind of go hand in hand. Love them both. Also in my video for best books of the year. They're incredible. A Long Way Home, another memoir. This one, which I talk about, in the video, but great story, like great, definitely a story that was worth being written about. Saru Brearley though, he just lacked some of the emotion in it. And so if you're going to read or watch one of them, like you should do them both basically, because you get more information in the book, but then the movie has some of the emotion that the book was lacking. The Green Knight, this is the oldest book I read. It was published in the 1300s. Well, it was written in the 1300s, and then it was published like sometime in the 1800s, and loved it. Fantastic, incredible movie. Child 44, I liked the premise. I loved the premise, but then we get into the murder solving, and that's where I didn't love that so much. So there were some things about this book that I loved, and then other things that I was like, I'm not really feeling this. Death of Stalin, this one is a graphic novel, a comic book, and it was fine. I just don't think graphic novels are for me. I'll try another one at some point, I'm sure, but yeah, this one was okay. Stick with the movie though, in my opinion. Misery, loved it, incredible. Again, it was on my list for best books of 2021. Leaving Las Vegas. So this one, I read this for the podcast, but the book, it's depressing and it's gritty. And there were just things about the book. I finished it and it was good, but I didn't want to see the things that were talked about in a movie, like it covers a lot of topics that can be hard to write about. and I just didn't want to see how the movie portrayed those things. And so I didn't watch the movie. And so I didn't end up covering it for the podcast, but it was a good book. It's not one I would recommend to everybody. Like, gritty is the word that keeps coming back to me. Our main characters is one, an alcoholic who has decided to drink himself to death. And the second character is a prostitute in Las Vegas. And so, yeah, that's what it's about. And the author himself struggled with alcoholism. And there's, again, you can always tell when someone is writing about addiction, you can tell when they themselves have had that experience, because some of the stories he talks about in relation to the alcoholism, like, are so true. And anyone who struggles with alcohol or is familiar with alcoholism and the things that it causes, even minor things, like, for example, I'll talk about this one a bit more. He talks about going to the bank in the morning and he has the shakes because he hasn't started drinking yet. And he's shaking so much, like he can't even write the check and he's just overwhelmed. And he also talks about trying to get his wallet out to buy alcohol. And again, he's shaking so much he can't even get the money out of his wallet. And so he has made a habit of keeping money in his front pocket for just such occasions. Just things like that. Like, what author would think to include the fact that he has money in his front pocket for when he gets the shakes? Like, who would think of that unless they're someone who went through it themselves or have someone they're very close to who went through it, you know? But yeah, it's a depressing book and it's got some disturbing things in it overall. And that's why I didn't watch the movie, even though Nicolas Cage won an Oscar for his performance. But anyway, we have Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Fantastic book. Highly recommend. On my list of best books. Gone Girl. This one actually on Goodreads, this one had the most ratings. That was my note, which I should have double checked. But I mean, I'm sure Harry Potter has the most. But aside from Harry Potter, this one had the most ratings. And loved this book. Fantastic. I Know What You Did Last Summer. This one was good. It's definitely aimed toward a younger audience. I loved Lois Duncan when I was in junior high. And now that I'm an adult, like, the book was good. But it's definitely aimed for a younger audience. Crooked House by Agatha Christie. This one was good. I found it entertaining. Ghetto Cowboy. This is another one that is aimed towards a younger audience, like age 10 and up. And I loved it. So yeah, I'd recommend it to your kids that are 10 and up and to you as well. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. If I were to describe this with one word, I would say overrated. And I also used to love this book. And so I'm seeing, my own change through the years as someone who used to love this book so much. And now when I read it, I'm just like, eh. Anyway, on to Wise Guy, the inspiration for Goodfellas. Love this book so much more than I thought I would. Highly recommend. Beloved by Toni Morrison. Fantastic book. Incredible. On my list for best books of 2021. Little Woman. I enjoyed this one. A Christmas Carol. This was the shortest book I read. Like, it was 104 pages. And yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a fun Christmas read. The Revenant. The movie's better, but I did enjoy the book. House of Gucci. Again, I think I liked the movie better. The book was just, it had some parts that were really interesting and then other parts that were just way too dense. Number 45, Flim Flam Man. And this one is the lowest rated book I read, and it has a rating of 3.44, which still isn't bad. But this one I was going to cover on the podcast because Sean Penn made this into a movie called Flag Day. However, it was limited release and not playing where I live, so I never ended up seeing the movie. And the book itself, not the best memoir I've ever read, but yeah, it was good. City of Saints and Madmen. So this is by the author who wrote the Southern Reach trilogy. And this book was the longest book I read this year. It was 704 pages. However, it didn't feel long because it's a series of short stories. And so you never really get time to feel like it's dragging or you're bored because they're a bunch of short stories. And incredible. This is the first book in the Ambergris series. I have a video talking about them if you want to see it up there. And yeah, definitely weird. It's like what I want out of a Jeff Vandermeer book. And so the other two in the series are Shriek and Finch, which I also read and I also loved. How to Have Impossible Conversations. This was the only self-help type book I read this year. And this one was great. It probably should have been on my best books of 2021 because yeah, I really loved it. I should read it again. But it's how to talk to people who have differing views than your own. So often, especially these day and age where people are so firm in what they believe and they don't want to hear the opposing side. And they just want to tell you why you're wrong. And so this book is saying, that never works. And it's about epistemology, I believe that's the word. And that's like finding out why someone believes the things they do and why you believe the things that you do. And getting to the root of that. I think everybody should question their beliefs, right? Because if your beliefs can't stand up to questioning and to scrutiny, then they must be pretty weak, right? And so I think it's good to get to the root of what you believe and what you think. It's about like how to do that with yourself, and also how to have conversations with other people and get them to think about where these beliefs are coming from and what is the root of this belief. Yeah, highly recommend. And then Nightmare Alley. This one was amazing. I loved it. The Shining. This was the second longest book I read. This, according to Goodreads, is 659 pages. I read on my Kindle, so you don't really have page numbers, but incredible. Loved it so much. So good. And my book versus movie comparison for that will be coming out January 12th. I actually filmed it yesterday, and I'm quite happy with how it has turned out. So you should definitely check that out. It will be released as a video, like a talking head video like this, as well as a podcast. And yeah, I know it's one that has been talked about so much at this point, but I think I do a good job at putting my own unique spin, my own unique opinions on it. Obviously, not all of my opinions are unique, and some of them are ones that a lot of people have noticed as well. But nonetheless, I feel like it was a good video. And I share, my own personal, how I relate to it in certain ways, I guess. But amazing book, fantastic. Born Standing Up is a memoir by Steve Martin. This was a quick read, and if you like Steve Martin, you should definitely read it. It is about his career as a stand-up comedian. So if you want to hear him talk about being an actor, that's not really in this so much. He touches on The Jerk, which is a fantastic movie. So great. And so that was like his first movie in Hollywood. So he talks about that one, but for the most part, it's about his stand-up career. But yeah, if you're a fan of Steve Martin, I definitely recommend it. Then She Was Gone. This was a a thriller. And I read this because Noelle Gallagher, the booktuber, talked about it, and I was wanting just a fun thriller. And yeah, this was a fun thriller. The Lost World, which is the second Jurassic Park book. I read this for my book versus movie comparison, and this episode will not be out until like the third week of January. So stay tuned for that one. The book itself though, The Lost World, honestly, just stick with the first. I guess this is kind of a sneak peek into my book versus movie video, but I did not love this book. The first one was incredible, and then this one is just kind of, it didn't need to exist, essentially. And then the very last book I read this year was Bunny by Mona Awad. This one I literally finished like an hour ago, so I'm still kind of processing it. It gets so much hype, especially with like how weird it is. It's so weird. It's the weirdest book I've ever read. And yeah, it's weird. Yeah, I think it was just so hyped up that I had really high expectations to just be so shocked, and like the surprises and the twists that I wouldn't see coming. And they weren't quite as surprising, I guess, as I expected. I don't know. There's still, I don't know. I liked it, and overall I would recommend it. Having said that, there are people that I personally know that I would not recommend this to, so it kind of depends. But yeah, it was weird enough, but I don't know. It sort of dragged at times for me personally, and so I kind of just wanted it to get to the point. But again, I'm still kind of processing that one and trying to decide my ultimate thoughts on that. But yeah, those are the 55 books I read this year, which I did want to mention another book that I should have included in my DNF video, books I didn't finish this year, but I forgot. And I wanted to mention it specifically because in my video, my book versus movie comparison and book review video for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, I was like, if you love this book and if you like Hunter S. Thompson and you haven't looked into Oscar Zito Acosta and read his books, then you're doing yourself a disservice and you need to read his books. And at the time, I was like a quarter of the way through Autobiography of a Brown Buffalo, and I was enjoying it. But I think I got like over halfway, and then I just stopped because even though it's interesting hearing about him and his life, and he even goes into his childhood, he just shares too much about bodily functions. Like, this happens in the beginning because he has an ulcer and it causes him all these stomach issues and bowel issues and stuff. But I was like, that's fine, I can read this. But then as it goes on, he's just talking about other bodily functions, and it's just written in a gross way. And it's things, he just shares stories too about it that I'm like, I do not need to know this story. Why do you feel the need to write this? And so honestly, it was just a bit too gross in that way, I guess. And maybe that makes me sound like a prude, but I don't know. I tried, and I was listening to it on audio, so I don't know. I guess I could get the actual book and just skim over those parts, but I felt I needed to acknowledge that because in my Fear and Loathing video, I was maybe a little bit pretentious telling people that they needed to read Oscar Zita Acosta books, but I don't know. I am glad I looked into him more, and I'm glad I at least read half of his book, and it was interesting hearing about his life growing up. I just wish, like, why did he have to include all the stuff about his body and, you know, all that stuff? Like, we don't need to know these personal details, you know? And anyway, so that one is one I DNF'd, but I forgot to mention. But yeah, so those are all the books. But again, if you want to hear more, check out my book versus movie comparisons. Subscribe to my channel, please. I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching this video. Happy New Year, by the way. Here is to 2022 and lots of amazing books to be read and amazing movies to be watched. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.